This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace.
Last year, I went through many different life changes. I needed to take a pause and examine how I was feeling in the inside to better show up for the ones who need me to be my best version of myself.
When you're navigating life's changes, Talkspace can help. Talkspace is the #1 rated online therapy, bringing you professional support from licensed therapists and psychiatry providers that you can access anytime, anywhere.
Living a busy life, navigating a long-distance relationship, becoming a first-step father, Talkspace made all of those journeys possible. I could speak with my therapist in the office. I could speak with my therapist in the comfort of my home. I was never alone.
Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance, no problem. Now get $80 off your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
I sold my car in Carvana last night.
Well, that's cool.
No, you don't understand. It went perfectly. Real offer, down to the penny. They're picking it up tomorrow. Nothing went wrong.
So, what's the problem?
That is the problem. Nothing in my life goes as smoothly. I'm waiting for the catch.
Maybe there's no catch.
That's exactly what a catch would want me to think.
Wow, you need to relax.
I need to knock on wood. Do we have wood? Is this table wood?
I think it's laminate.
Okay, yeah, that's good. That's close enough.
Car selling without a catch. Sell your car today on Carvana. Pickup fees may apply.
Yo, check it out. Thanks again for checking out another edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I'm 12 Kyle. Then again, you probably already know that by now. If you haven't done so already, make sure that you subscribe to the podcast. You can find the podcast just about anywhere. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Soundcloud, Overcast FM, Pocket Cast. You can definitely catch me on Facebook, facebook.com/spell it out, TWELVEKYLE. You can definitely catch me on Instagram at 12Kyle Podcast. And of course, you can find me hanging out on the Twitter streets at 12Kyle, the number 12KYLE, or you can follow us at 12Kyle Podcast. And the 12Kyle Podcast is now being featured on Google Play. So, hey, there's no reason not to subscribe to the podcast. All right, check it out. Here's what I want to talk about today. Blind dates. Never really been a fan of blind dates. I'll give you a couple of reasons as to why I've never been a fan of blind dates. And before the show is over, I will share with you a horrific blind date story that happened to me back in the day. All right, so check it. Like I mentioned before, just never really been a fan of blind dates. I think most people tend to be somewhat optimistic about blind dates. I've always been relatively pessimistic about blind dates. I think because for me, I think it's a lot easier when you have a working knowledge of someone and, you know, it's not just kind of thrown together, or you're just kind of brought with someone who you never met through a mutual acquaintance or what have you, or if you met via the internet. Now, I know for some people, blind dates do work. I just never been a fan of it. I think you leave a lot to chance. I think anything can and probably will happen on a blind date, and I usually don't see them go too well. And here's a couple of reasons. For one, I think when you talk about dating, first and foremost, dating is a numbers game. It is what it is, and people hate to hear you say that, but that's what it is. It's a numbers game. I mean, really, to achieve the ultimate goal, you have to go on a certain number of dates. And I'm saying if there's 30, and it's not like if it's 30 days in a month that you should be going out on 30 different dates, although that has happened. I think you just have to realize that it's just like if you were selling something over the phone, right? You know, cold calls. If you were doing that, you'd have to make, before you got one sale, you might have to make 100 phone calls. And dating is kind of the same way. I mean, like, you have to go on a certain number of dates to to really land, the one that you want to land, if you will. And I just think like when it comes to blind dates, I think blind dates are going to probably fall somewhere in that upper echelon as far as the numbers that you're trying to achieve. So, and I think more often than not, you may or may not get paired up with someone who is slightly not compatible with you. And I can only imagine how frustrating that is. I've heard friends and family talk about it. It can be extremely frustrating. So I think that's one of the things that's very difficult when it comes to dating, is the fact that, it's a numbers game. So you have to basically go through a number of dates really to get where you want to go. And ultimately, I think, you're going to encounter some blind dates, and you're going to probably encounter some weirdos. But hey, that's just me. Another thing is, I think a lot of times, more often than not, you know how it goes. When you go on a blind date, you're usually introduced to that person through a mutual acquaintance, right? Somebody hooked you up. Personally, I've never been a fan of hooking people up. Full disclosure, growing up in high school and in college, and even after I got out of college, like I knew a lot of people, and I still do know a lot of people. I mean, it's neither here nor there, but I think the thing is that like growing up, I always knew, like for me, I always knew a lot of girls. And it wasn't necessarily girls I was trying to kick it with or trying to holler at, but it was just I knew a lot of girls. So a lot of times cats would always ask me, yo, man, why don't you hook me up with such and such? Why don't you, and I've never, that's never like really sat well with me, because I know Jim and Jim is single, and I know Tina and I know Tina's single, that doesn't necessarily mean that, in my opinion, Tina and Jim should be, together. And then a lot of people will say, well, hey, they're two single people. You should just introduce them and see what happens. It's not that simple, because sometimes, like I used to find myself as, before I could play the matchmaker, I would already make in my mind some type of conclusion as to whether or not I think they were a good match or not. So I think that's a slippery slope, because when you introduce someone to someone else, it's a blind, and you go on a blind date, you can try to play matchmaker, but ultimately you don't know what that other person is capable of. You don't really know that, even no matter how well you know the person. So it's just a slippery slope, man. I remember one time I tried to introduce this girl to one of my homeboys, and she saw a picture of him. She was like, he's cute, but his head is shaped funny and his ears are big. I mean, you're looking at a picture. What, head shaped funny and ears are big? I mean, you're single. He's single. Why not, connect? But suffice to say, I never introduced the two of them. And, nothing ever happened. But people have always kind of tried to peg me as the guy to, match people up. Never been my style. Now, what I will do is, if I have a single female friend, if I have a single male friend, I will try to get two people in the same room. Now, once I get you in the same room, hey, that's on you as to what you can or can't do. If you can spit game, hey, spit your game, man. If she's not receptive to it, hey, it's not my fault. That's another thing too. Like when you're playing matchmaker, I don't want to be held accountable for what happens or doesn't happen. And that typically, that happens with blind dates. And I think sometimes people either underestimate or overestimate the ability of the matchmaker. That, like I said, it's a slippery slope, man. It's a slippery slope. I think, when people offer to set you up, most of the times they think it, they think it through. They're not just going to go out on a whim and say, hey, I want you to meet this guy, yada, yada, yada. There's a reason behind it, and they're probably looking out for your best interest. Personally, I wouldn't take it up on it, but again, I may not be the guy to ask because of my experiences. And, I mean, of course, I'm full disclosure, I'm married. So, I mean, you don't have to hook me up with anybody. But if I were single, I probably wouldn't be trying to get hooked up with nobody. I'd rather kind of figure it out on my own. That way, if it works, cool. If it doesn't, I'm not looking at you sideways because you introduced me to some crazy chick. So that's another thing. I'm just not, I've never been a fan of the matchmaking. I think the matchmaking, especially with friends, like I said, most friends, their intentions are good, but, it doesn't necessarily always work out to your favor. So that kind of contributes to what a blind date could or could not be. Another thing is that I think a lot of times with blind dates, there's a level of assumption, and it can be on either side. It could be the assumption that you both are, for lack of a better term, desperate. Because you're going on a blind date, I don't necessarily know that is true, that you're desperate. But I think what that does is it allows someone to kind of step into a situation with already one preconceived notion about you, or maybe you have a preconceived notion about them. I think that's kind of counterproductive when it comes to dating. I think, you should be stepping into a date with a clean conscience and clear slate and the whole nine. But I think a lot of times when someone goes on a blind date, when two people go on a blind date, both of them are stepping into it assuming that this other person is desperate, or they, the only thing they have in common is that they're both looking to meet someone. That could be a positive or a negative. I look at it as a negative. I just don't think that that's cool. So you kind of got to live with the results on that one. And then another thing that I think, one reason why I don't like blind dates is that people always look at blind dates with the assumption that you should go because you're going to have fun, or you should go because it's a free dinner, or you, for those of you cheap people out there. Here's the thing, right? I think it's very plausible to think that you could have fun, but I think especially as we get older, our time is valuable. Nobody wants to waste their time. Dating is hard in and of itself once you get to know someone, but if you're just going out on a whim to meet someone and it's a blind date, and you agreed to meet at a certain place or what have you, I don't think that you can just assume that now, of course, you want to go into it to have fun, but I don't necessarily know that you go into it assuming that you're going to have fun, because you might not have fun at all. And that brings me to my last point as to why I don't like blind dates. I think when people go on blind dates, it's almost like you're stuck, right? Like, let's say you go on a blind date and you go out to dinner, right? And you're at dinner and you meet the person, you start talking to them, and 5 minutes in, you realize this ain't gonna work. What do? I mean, you're stuck there for the next hour and a half, 2 hours, with somebody who you're not the least bit interested in. And then you have that awkward moment at the end of the night where you have to go your separate ways, and, they might want to kiss, and you're like, man, dude, I'm not even feeling you. How you going to try to kiss me? So I think I think going on a blind date is the most troubling thing, is that you could actually be stuck with someone for a particular amount of time. And that's just, and you could be bored out of your mind. Or like, let's say for me, if I were to go on a blind date, obviously I'm someone who likes to talk, But I don't want to necessarily dominate the conversation. I want the conversation to flow. I want it to go back and forth. But I don't like it if you can't carry a conversation. I mean, like for me, that would be the ultimate no-no. Like you got to go, man. You got to kick rocks. I can't. Get out of here. You know what I mean? Like if you can't carry a conversation, then I don't want to dominate, and I'm not going to sit and talk. And then that's another thing too. You'll have that blind date or two where someone only wants to talk about themselves, or even better, they want to talk about their ex. That's when you got to be like, yo, I got to get the hell out of here. That's when you got to text your friend, and somebody's got to text you or call you and tell you about a family emergency, and you got to fake like you pump fake and get up out of there. And that's another thing too that I've heard a lot about on blind dates. People, kind of, pulling out their phones. And I remember one time, one of my followers, and I'm not gonna throw a name out there. And I'm sure she's going to listen to this. She was on a blind date and she was tweeting to everybody while she was on the blind date. And I hit her up on Twitter like, yo, you should be talking to old boy. And she was like, yo, this dude is so freaking boring. I mean, like her conversation that particular night on her timeline was hilarious. And she was just really just biding the time. And I'm like, okay, well, if you're sitting there and you're tweeting with us and you got your phone out, this dude has to know that he's not getting anywhere with you tonight. And she said that, I think she made reference to the fact like the dude wanted to go someplace else after dinner. She was like, nah, playboy, that's it. So I don't even know if he got the hint. But yeah, if your date pulls out their cell phone and they're on Twitter or they're on Facebook, any other social media, and they're carrying on conversations while you're on this blind date, it's probably not going to be good. And you probably won't get a call back. So yeah, man, I'm just not a fan of blind dates. Now, for those of you listening, if you've had great experiences with blind dates, by all means, hit me up. Hit me up on Twitter. Let me know what you think about this podcast. Let me know what you think about, going on blind dates, or if you had any success stories. Personally, not a fan. I'm just not a fan. All right, man. So one of the great things about this podcast is that I will reveal myself from time to time. So we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back from the break, I'm going to share with you a horrific blind date story that I had back from college. This is before I got married, for those of you listening. Don't want to get me in trouble. But yeah, your boy I had a blind date and it didn't go as well as I would have liked. So, and it left me mentally scarred. But I live to tell about it. So, like I said, we're going to take a quick commercial break. Come back. I'll share with you my blind date story, and I promise you, you will laugh. You will definitely laugh. Be back in a second.
Janet Jackson. Oh, Janet Jackson. The girl Debbie hooked me up with. Oh. Hey, hold up. I'll be right back.
Hey, see if she got a friend.
Ooh, what's that? Not a damn thing.
So we gonna kick it or what?
We can kick it, but I forgot I had to go pick up my mom from work, and you know how that is.
That's all right. I'll take you to get it.
Nah, she don't like a lot of people with me when I go get her.
Who's that girl Smokey's talking to?
Some girl he hooked up with.
She's a big one.
Humongous.
Look, why don't you go to the street and get something to eat? I know you hungry.
Lord, let me go inside and see what's wrong with this crazy man.
I'm right behind.
Okay.
Cause see, I ate twice before I came.
God damn!
You gonna call me?
I'ma call you. But if you come by, I won't call you. Okay? Don't ever come by here. Okay?
Okay.
All right.
Bye, Smokey.
And with that, I'm back. Yo, shout out to Smokey, man. Friday was one of the most funniest movies ever. As I mentioned to you right before the break, man, I'm going to share with you a story that I had about a blind date that went terribly wrong. Much like everybody else, I grew up watching those TV shows and game shows like Love Connection, for instance. Where you have two people come together and they go out on a blind date and they try to quote unquote make a love connection. So, and to be honest, I always found those shows to be funny and very entertaining, to say the least. And, I will be honest, it's always funny and it's always entertaining when it's not you. So my story goes like this. Let me reminisce for a second, right? So it's probably about my sophomore year in college, right? So I'm chilling, everything's going good. I'm at South Carolina State University. It's probably around the end of March, beginning of April. We just finished spring football practice. Everything's going good. School is going well. I'm single. I'm ready to mingle. You know what I mean? So everything's good. So this particular day, very nondescript day, I just happened to go to the cafeteria, and I'm in the caf and I'm chilling, and I get my food and I sit down, right? And I look up and I see this girl, and I'd never seen her before. That's one of the great things about, when the weather breaks, you get a chance to see people that you may or may not have seen during the wintertime, because obviously, when it's winter, it's colder, people aren't hanging out like they do when it's warm, especially on the HBCU campus, right? So I look up and I see this girl, very, very pretty girl. I mean, really pretty. And she's nice little short haircut, just, nice. I'm like, yo. And the first thought that came to my mind was like, yo, who is that? Because I had never seen her before. Like, is she new? And so we made eye contact, and she kind of smiled, and, kept eating. And I looked up again like a few minutes later, and she was looking at me, and she kind of smiled again. So I kind of smiled back, So I looked off, kind of tried to play it cool. Now I'm eating by myself. She's eating by herself. So I look up again a couple minutes later, and she's still looking at me. So I'm like, yo, I don't know who this is, but I need to find out. So she gets up and she walks out. She's walking out of the caf. She's looking and she's leaving. She's just, at this point, she's staring at me. And we're both just making this incredible eye contact, and I got the vibe going and everything. So I'm like, yo, she's giving me major rhythm right now. I need to holler, but I had to play it cool, right? I just wasn't gonna overwhelm her with my game, at that at that particular time. I said I'm gonna just chill back in the cut like iodine and just chill for a second. And I knew I'd see her again, so it wasn't no big deal, right? So here's the weird part, right? So later on that particular evening, and this is the cool thing that I remember about her, this girl had on she had on yellow sundress, and the dress was fitting perfect, right? So, all right, so here we go. So later that evening, I get a phone call, and it's from my homegirl, Tanya. And Tanya is like, she called, and Tanya and I have a class together, but that particular day, Tanya didn't come to class. So Tanya, when she called me, I just assumed that she was calling to, ask me about, what we did in class or whatever, yada, yada, yada. So Tanya says, well, hey, Kyle, did you see a girl in the caf today? A real pretty girl, brown skin, short haircut, with a yellow dress on. And so I started thinking to myself, wait a minute, what was I set up? Was this, candid camera or something. And so I told Tanya, I said, yeah. I said, I did see a girl like that. She was like, yeah. She said, well, that's Sandy. And she told me to tell you that she thinks that you're cute. Word? And I'm like, oh, so you know this girl? I was like, I never seen her before. Where's she from? She told me where she was from and the whole nine. So I was like, so what's up with her? She was like, well, she thinks she thinks you're cute. And she said, I think y'all should, hook up. I'm like, word? I said, so what's the, so me, I'm asking like questions. I'm like, okay, so what's the deal? What's her story? She was like, nah, she's single. You're single. So, she thinks you're cute. She saw you today. I think y'all should hook up. I'm like, all right, bet. So I said, you need to run me them numbers. So I got the numbers and I got a phone number. And of course, there was no cell phones back then. This is a number to her room. So anyway, so I asked Tanya, I said, well, does she know that I'm going to call? She was like, yeah, of course. I was like, all right, bet. So I called her not long after I got off the phone with Tanya. And, so she answered the phone. She was like, hey, hi, this is Sandy. And, so we started talking or whatever. Everything's cool. Conversation real good. We talked for like an hour. And, real good conversation. What I was able to ascertain within the conversation was that, she was pre-med student. She was from, I think she was like from Columbia, South Carolina. And, she's real cool. She didn't really hang out much. Because I asked her, I said, well, I had never seen you around. She was like, well, I see you around all the time. And I'm like, okay. That's pretty typical because I'm always on the scene. But nonetheless, we had a great conversation. And, in the midst of the conversation, I realized that she was a sports fan. Huge football fan, right? So I'm like, yo, you a football fan too? I mean, that's a major check mark in my book. So, and then not only was she a major football fan, but she loved hip hop. So I'm like, wait a minute, she's dope, she looks good, she's smart, and she loves football, and she loves hip hop. Oh, this is a win-win, son. I am definitely going to win. So we had a nice conversation, and then we talked for the next couple of days, and but we had not seen each other since that encounter in the calf, right? So I think maybe 2 days after our initial conversation, we were on the phone one night, and she had to get off the phone. She had to go down the hall or something. She had to do something in her room. And whatever the case was, she put the phone down. She was like, hang on a second. So she put the phone down, and I could hear somebody singing in the background. So I'm like, who is that singing? I'm thinking to myself, like, who is it? I mean, like, it sounded really, really good. So I'm like, who is that singing in the background? So when she got back on the phone, I said, yo, who was that singing in the background? She was like, that was me. I was like, you can sing too? She was like, yeah. She was like, I can sing. I said, well, sing something. And she sang You Bring Me Joy by Anita Baker. I was like, yo. And she killed it. I was like, son, this is crazy. She's dope. She loves hip hop. She loves football. And she can sing. Oh, this is a win. I'm going to win. Yo, I was bugging, yo. So, fast forward to the upcoming Sunday. She had suggested that, we finally officially meet for brunch. So I was like, all right, bet, cool, that's what's up. And I had I was already geeked to like just really sit down and sit face to face with her, whatever like that. So what I did was and of course now again, the only time that I had seen her was that day in the cab. So what I did was I went and hollered at my boy Nay, and I was like, yo, Nay, do you know this girl? Because she actually has a class. She actually had a class with Nay, and I was like, yo, Nay, do you know Sandy? He was like, yeah, she's in my class. And so I was like, well, how does she look? I said, how would you describe her? And he was like, oh man, her body is tight. And I was like, okay, that's what's up. This is my guy. This is my dog. So I'm like, he says she's tight. I already saw her once, so it's gotta be money. I'm good. Or at least so I thought. So here we go. We go to brunch on Sunday. So we decided to meet for brunch at 11:30 in the calf again. So at this particular time, that morning, I never forget that morning. Like I was getting ready, I threw on nice little gear. I wasn't going over there looking bummy. But I had some nice, shorts on, sneakers, had Air Force Ones, and it was real crispy and clean. And I had a nice polo shirt, on. So I came over there looking fly. I had my little shades in my pocket. So anyway, I was trying to be fly, and I distinctly remember that particular morning. A couple of my teammates, they came by my room and they were like, "Yo, we're going to the caf. You rolling with us?" I was like, "Nah." I was like, "I got something else I got to do." I said, "I'll be over there later." I didn't tell them I was going on a blind date. I didn't tell them I was meeting some chick, because I was kind of private. I try to keep my business, to myself. Good luck with that. But I'm very private, and and you guys know me. I'm very shy, so I'm not really good at telling my business. So nonetheless, I get to the cab, and I because we said that we would meet at 11:30, I made sure that I got there at 11:20. So I was already seated, food in hand and everything, because I wanted to, I always like to get places early. I wanted to scope the scene out. I wanted to pick a table kind of in the cut, just so we could be, I didn't want to be bothered by my teammates or anything like that. So it's all good. So I sit down and I'm sitting there and I'm chilling, and it's 11:30, and I'm eating and I'm looking down, so I'm not even paying attention. And this girl comes up and she has her tray and she sits across from me. She sits down, and she had her driver's license on her tray. I don't know why she had a driver's license out. Maybe she did, or maybe it was her student ID. I think, okay, let's say it was her student ID, right? And so she sits down and she says, "Hi, Kyle, nice to finally meet you." And I look up, and it's not the girl that I saw in the caf in the yellow dress. Her? So I'm like, "Hi, how are you?" And so at this point, I'm playing it off because I don't know who this girl is. This ain't the same girl, the cutie with the yellow sundress. This girl who was in front of me was somebody else. And she wasn't as cute as the other girl. So my at this point, my head is spinning. My head is spinning, and my mouth is trying to come to grips with what is actually happening to me. So I said, "Well, how you doing?" So I happened to glance down, and on her student ID, it said Sandy, whatever her last name was. And so this is the girl, but it's not the girl who I saw, a week prior to in the yellow sundress. So she said, "Well, it's nice to finally meet you." And, she was like, you're such a nice guy. I was looking forward to this. And I was like, "Yeah, me too." And I gotta keep it 100, y'all. I looked up at her, and she had on like this tank top, right? I told you it was warm. She had on a tank top, and she had hair on her chest, y'all. And I don't mean just a little bit of hair. I mean, like, she had more hair on her chest than me. Oh my God, are you serious? I got a chia pet, yo. What's going on here? I was like losing my mind. All the while I'm trying to talk, but in my head was spinning. I'm like, yo, what happened? Like, this cannot be. And so we're having a conversation. So she's and she's talking sports, she's talking hip hop, and I'm trying to put on a good face, but I can't reconcile how Tanya, the girl that Tanya introduced me to, this cannot be the girl. This can't be the same girl. It can't be that big of a coincidence. The girl who was making googly eyes at me just a week ago in the yellow sundress, this is not her. So where is she? So suffice to say, this blind date is not going as planned. So I make it through the blind date, right? And the conversation is good. My head is still spinning the whole time because I still can't wrap my head around what's actually transpiring. I don't know what happened. I don't know what what was going on. So, we ended it, and I walked her to the elevator for dorm, and I left. And she was like, well, I'll call you later. I was like, all right, cool. That's what's up. And when I tell you that walk back to my dorm, which was, I don't know, a 2-minute walk, seemed like it took 30 years to get there. So I get to my dorm. The first person I call is Tanya. And Tanya's like, well, yo, how did the brunch go? And I was like, Tanya, that's not her. Where's Sandy? She was like, what do you mean? Didn't you just have brunch with her? I said, I just had brunch with somebody, but it wasn't Sandy. And she was like, yes, it was. She said, she told me she was going to see you for brunch this morning. And I said, no. I said, Tanya, that's not the girl that I saw with the yellow dress. I said, this girl, she was, decent looking. I said, but she had hair on her chest. I was trying to plead my case, yo. I couldn't help it. Like, I was just like, and I hope she's not listening, but let me look around. I hope she ain't listening. But anyway, if she's listening, I'm sorry. But damn, I mean, like, this wasn't the girl. So Tanya was dumbfounded. She was like, what do you mean? I said, Tanya, I don't understand what's going on. Like, the girl that you described in a yellow sundress, I said, this is not the girl. I said, it was another brown skin, very attractive, nice ass body. Nice body. I said, this isn't her. And she was like, well, who is she? I don't know who you're talking about. Come to find out is that the girl in the yellow dress, the yellow sundress that I saw that particular day, that really wasn't Sandy. And her name really isn't Sandy. And to this day, from that day in 1990 something, I think it was 93, 92, 93, to this day, I still don't know who that girl is. I still don't know who she is. I saw her maybe 3 more times on campus. And I couldn't say anything to her because I was just shook. I was blown. Anyway, so Sandy calls and we talk, and she asked me, well, did you like what you saw? And I was like, yeah. I was lying my ass off, yo. I tried not to play it like I wasn't impressed, but I really wasn't impressed. And don't get me wrong, you guys listening. And I know you're probably laughing hysterically right now. It wasn't that she wasn't attractive. She just wasn't the person that I thought that she was. So if you go someplace expecting to see, I don't know, Nia Long, and you end up seeing Grace Jones, is not the same. And she's not Grace Jones. But I'm just saying, you get my point. So nonetheless, man, she asked me that, and I gave her an answer. I told her, I said, no, you're very attractive. I mean, so, I basically lied, because at this point she wasn't who I thought she was. So it didn't matter. I mean, like, there's nothing she could say. So anyway, she called me back, I think the next day, and I kind of brushed her. I'm not gonna lie, I kind of brushed her. I was like, yeah, I just got in from practice. We'd already finished spring practice. I said, yeah, I just got in from practice, from working out. I was like, kind of tired. I said, I'll call you back. And I didn't call her back. And then she called back like a couple of days later, and I kind of brushed her again. And then she called back another time, and I kind of brushed her off again. So, after like 3 brush offs, I think she kind of got the point. Like, I wasn't really checking for her like that. And I felt bad, but I didn't feel bad. Because it was, to be honest, my feelings were hurt. My feelings were destroyed. I don't know how that was that you had 2 girls in the same place with yellow sundress. And to be honest, you guys, I never saw this girl. I never saw Sandy before in that particular day in the cab, because I was making googly eyes at Lady X. I think I get that. That's all I can call her now at this point. Lady X. That's what she is. She's a mystery. The mystery lady. Nonetheless, man, that's my blind date story, man. It did not go well at all. That's the only blind date I've ever been on. And suffice to say, I will never, ever go on a blind date again. One, because I'm married, and two, I'm not doing that. Not a fan of blind dates at all. Nonetheless, I've given you an opportunity to laugh at me. Thanks again for checking out another edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. It's your boy 12 Kyle. I'll holler at you next time. 5,000.
When you manage procurement for multiple facilities, every order matters. But when it's for a hospital system, they matter even more. Grainger gets it and knows there's no time for managing multiple suppliers and no room for shipping delays. That's why Grainger offers millions of products in fast, dependable delivery, so you can keep your facility stocked, safe, and running smoothly. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
If you work in university maintenance, Grainger considers you an MVP because your playbook ensures your arena is always ready for tip-off. And Grainger is your trusted partner, offering the products you need all in one place, from HVAC and plumbing supplies to lighting and more. And all delivered with plenty of time left on the clock, so your team always gets the win. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, visit Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.